From one of the most elite test pilots to leading the Air Force's AI revolution, Tucker Hamilton's journey is wild. He dreamed of being an astronaut, flew some of the most advanced aircraft in the world, ran MIT's Accelerator lab for the military, and now he's writing a book about what he's learned along the way. His story kicks off 50 Chairs, a podcast about leaders who keep showing up even when no one else did. The name comes from my dad, who once preached to an empty room and still insisted on setting out all 50 chairs, believing people would come. Tucker did the same thing. He kept showing up, pushing forward, even when the outcome wasn't clear. That is what this podcast is all about. Go give it a listen on Apple and Spotify. And thank you to our founding sponsor, the Veteran Fund. Welcome back, Tucker. How are you?
Great to be back. No, I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. We had so much to talk about that we have to have episode 2 of the first podcast, which was amazing. So what I would love to do as we kind of kick off the second episode is just do a little bit of a recap and we covered some ground yesterday in that conversation. And one of the things, as I was actually listening to the podcast and just kind of thinking through your story, I realized, we didn't cover the end. And I would love to get to, you're doing some things now, and we can kind of backtrack from that. But from that 12-year-old boy looking up at the sky and thinking, gosh, I want to, be up there with the stars and be an astronaut, to test pilot and advising Jerry Bruckheimer on the initial thoughts around the Maverick, the movie, and, running MIT's AI lab. Like, what are you doing now? It's been quite the journey, and congratulations, you retired recently as a colonel. So yeah, let's start there. Like, what are you doing now?
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And we can absolutely jump into kind of that part of the story. It is interesting as you look back, though, on it's just a journey, right? We're all on with these experiences and these things that help shape us, some in good ways, some in bad ways. I think we need to appreciate that we don't know how it's going to end up. And I don't know how this is going to end up, right? Like, I'm just taking this step by step. And as I go through experiences, it just builds on that. And who knows what 1 year, 10, 20 years will look like from now if I am fortunate to still be here. But yeah, it was a crazy journey from kind of that dream as a child, the examples that I got from my parents, the leadership aspect of serving, like that desire to be a leader, and kind of where that brought me from, getting in the cockpit, staying in the cockpit with the encouragement, from my wife, to wanting to pursue test pilot, and then bumps along the road, becoming an air liaison officer, and then standing up a intelligence aircraft in combat, which was a remarkable experience. It really taught me a lot about perspective and empathy, and turning that into becoming a test pilot and going to test pilot school, which was a huge dream. And from there, just working hard, because, you get to this like huge goal that you have, which was going to test pilot school, becoming a test pilot. And then you're like, okay, what now? Okay, well, I need to be a good test pilot. And I didn't know what that was going to look like. So, started testing F-15s, F-15Cs, which is a single seat air-to-air fighter. That's what I started my career flying. And then I went into the F-15E as well. So when you become a test pilot for the Eagle, the F-15s, you test the F-15C and the F-15E. So did that for a couple of years, and ended up didn't plan on it at all, but working programmatics for the F-35 program, where I was up in DC. So we moved from our first flying assignment. This was a non-flying job, a program manager job, where I was overseeing the developmental test programmatics for the F-35. So I oversaw 2 flight test locations, Pax River, as I mentioned earlier, and Edwards Air Force Base. I oversaw what they were testing, how they were testing, what the schedule was, what systems. So I kind of oversaw that programmatically. And then I went out to Edwards and commanded the Edwards team, which I mentioned earlier, which was amazing team, amazing time to be a part of the program too. We were just getting the capability up and running. It took years to get us to where we needed to actually deliver for the warfighter. And so then we started doing all that capability, which was really neat. And from there, I ended up at MIT as a military fellow. And when I showed up within 3 months, I was like, I love Boston. This is a place is amazing. How can we stay? And they had just started this thing called the United States Air Force MIT AI Accelerator, and Laz Gordon was the kind of the brainchild behind it, which was a unique partnership between the Air Force and MIT proper, like the actual campus, and MIT Lincoln Lab, which is a FFRDC, which is a federally funded research and development center for the government. But the MIT proper, right, like the campus in Cambridge, that partnership was really unique. And so he was only in the seat, he like stood it up, kind of stood it up in the sense that he worked all the contracts, got everything, but then he got selected to command the next level. So he needed someone to replace him. And I was like, I'll stay here and do it. And, this was a time where they didn't have AI expertise at the '06 level.
Mm.
And so I was like, I'm here, I'm local, and I have a really good background with acquisition and flight tests and F-35 stuff. And so they slated me to like backfill him. So he then this was September. In January, like the thing became official. And 3 months later, he left and I took over. And then I was in charge of that for 2 years, which was fascinating. And because of that experience, it made me want to serve another assignment. Like I could have stayed on and just gotten out after that assignment.
Yeah.
But I was like, I had never been so concerned about our national security. And after decades, right, of flying fighters and developing technology, never so concerned about our national security until I learned about artificial intelligence. What was coming, how
Mm.
ill prepared we were for that future. And so I wanted to give back another assignment to really try to drive that conversation, so that we could make some gains in the field of artificial intelligence and really, the adoption of AI into military application. So I then became the commander of the 96 operations group, which is down at Eglin Air Force Base. And I oversaw the operations of a flight test for 18 unique platforms. I had 8 units underneath me, squadrons.
Yeah.
I oversaw the operations of all the flying on Eglin Air Force Base, or the busiest airspace in the Department of Defense. Funny enough, I don't think people realize that. So all the things over the Gulf of Mexico and over our land range there, I was responsible for that testing, as well as weapons testing, as well as the first AI-enabled autonomous systems testing. So we had like high-performance drones.
Wow.
And while I was there, I actually had the unique opportunity to fly on the wing of an XQ-58, which is a high-performance drone. Flew on the wing of the XQ-58, when for the first time in the history of aviation, an AI agent took control of a high-performance drone. So now, what listeners may not appreciate is you could fly something directly, right? Like you're at controls. You take a
Yeah.
pilot out, and then you could fly it semi-autonomously. So now that is a operator on the ground that is controlling an aircraft that is disconnected. And then you can have autonomous capability. That is, imagine like a predator drone. It loses link with the ground controller, and it is autonomously going to do something. So it doesn't have that semi-autonomous connection. It
Mm.
autonomously will go to a certain place in space. It'll orbit, and it's coded to do that. Like you will 30-degree bank turns at this location, 10 nautical mile legs, and you will fly at this airspeed. And everything's hard coded into the system. That's what we would consider autonomous flying. But then there was AI enabled autonomy. And this is what was turned on for the first time, where the AI agent, and don't think of it like a human, it's not a human, don't anthropomorphize it, but an AI agent would decide how to fly the mission, right? It would
Wow.
decide, this is the angle that you're going to do. It would have an objective like fly to this point, but it would decide how to get there. It wasn't hard coded in the sense that autonomous systems, deterministic systems, were hard coded. It was an AI agent deciding it. So we turned that AI agent on to see how it was going to start performing. And then we developed that capability so that we could teach, and I'm putting that in quotations for those that are just listening, teach the system what it means to be good at this mission. And then it would learn how to then decide what to do to be good at that mission. And so that was a really exciting opportunity. And this entire time when I'm at Eglin, I'm the ops group commander overseeing all these operations, an amazing team down there. Because of my AI experience at MIT, I also took on a dual hat role of being the chief of AI tests and operations. So I oversaw the operationalization of machine learning for the Department of the Air Force, which means the Air Force and the Space Force. And that looked like helping with generative AI efforts, as well as delivering AI enabled autonomy, or the initial steps of AI enabled autonomy. So it's cool to kind of do both of those roles. And then I really felt compelled to continue to drive change, but on the outside. And
Mm.
that gets us to like, what are you doing today? Which I think is really important for people to know some of that background, because what I'm doing today is now I'm on the industry side trying to like work with companies that I believe in, the technology that I think is going to actually help our warfighter, and drive change in AI and AI enabled autonomous systems. So that could be
Mhm.
from drones to surface vessels. So think of maritime surface vessels, to AI that is generative AI that helps flight instructors identify errors that pilots are making and highlight those errors, and then give them the right applications and the right background to help instruct a student that has an error, to other things like jet suit technology, as I work with Gravity Industries and chair their advisory board. And that's someone flying around with a jet suit, but there's application that I think is really beneficial for special operators in that sense. So I'm kind of like all over the place helping a number of these companies, as well as one company is really fantastic. I'm their CTO, is Fearless Technologies, which is a digital services integrator company. So now this is about like transforming organizations in the federal government, some in the
Mhm.
DoD, but primarily the federal government, in like being able to adopt technology, as well as upskilling their people. So yeah, I'm kind of hands in a
Yeah.
number of different things.
So basically, what you're telling me is that you're Tony Stark. Is that right?
Absolutely not. One, that dude is arrogant. Very well played by Robert Downey. Like he did such a good job capturing that character. No, I find in those situations, I'm being real honest here. I'm good at time management. I'm good at um, like recognizing where people may need some help. I am good at strategy and helping organizations see kind of beyond what's right in front of them, and networking and what that. But I understand math and science. I have a few advanced degrees, right, in engineering, but I am not the coder, right? Like I'm not the person behind that workbench, like creating whatever. I'm the person trying to help them,
Mm.
these remarkable minds, and I do not find myself in that same category as a remarkable mind. I see myself as an average person that is been put in amazing situations to try to help people that are remarkable.
Well, you have definitely accomplished above average things. That is super cool. I want to go back just a little bit because there's these 50 chair moments that that I'm starting to explore with people as we go through this. And you had mentioned that test pilot was kind of always the dream, right? It was like you wanted to get there. There were definitely some roadblocks in the way that you weren't sure how it was going to work out, but you kind of stuck to that. What was it about being a test pilot? And my only experience about, and understanding anything about test pilot is from the movies. But it sounds cool. Sounds incredibly cool because of the technology that you get exposed to. It's kind of, in my mind, when I think of test pilot, I think of Chuck Yeager, right? Like that's what comes to mind. But what was it about it that said that? You said something yesterday. I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I knew who I wanted to be. What was it about a test pilot that kind of fit that criteria for you?
Yeah, I found it fascinating, the convergence of the technology and the flying, right? Like being able to be on the leading edge of the technology with regard to aviation. So that was exciting. I really enjoyed the methodical, disciplined, deliberate approach that a test pilot has to take. People probably could have the wrong impression of what a test pilot is. Like maybe back in the 40s and 50s, like where it was quite different, or maybe in movies where it's represented a little bit different, like when Maverick, which was awesome. Like I recently actually watched the movie again with one of my kids, and he's like at the very beginning scene and he's pushing the aircraft to Mach 10, and that, like, he would never have been a good test pilot because you would never do that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
One, you would never take off when you don't have the approval to take off. So you wouldn't be like, oh, I'm going to save this program by taking off. And then two, if you get your test point, you don't keep pushing beyond, right? And then you listen to your entire team, and it's not the Maverick show. which once again, I love the movie, so don't get me wrong. It's great Hollywood.
Yeah.
But you know, like a good test pilot would be very disciplined with that
Mm.
approach. And there are times where you have to take certain measured risk, but that's the whole thing. Like we are experts, uh, and they train us to be in risk management. Like that's what being a test pilot is. So like that type of disciplined, deliberate approach, developing technology was really exciting for me. And I enjoyed the combat flying, like being prepared for combat, and that was cool. But I wanted to do more with it. I wanted to be able to help shape what the future combat was going to look like, what the future technology was going to deliver for our warfighter. So that really drew me in. And it loved it. It was perfect for me because it was about a team. You're working with contractors, you're working with engineers. You have like when we would fly our F-35 missions, it would be me and I'd be on hot mic so they could hear everything that I'm saying. They could see we have cameras in our helmets in the F-35. Amazing, like $500,000 helmets. Actually, I think $400,000 helmets. It would allow us to actually see through the aircraft, which is a side note. But you have cameras on the outside of the skin, and it would weave together a video that they put up in your helmet for with augmented reality. And when you look down, you could actually see the ground, not your feet. So you could actually kind of look through the aircraft in a sense. But either way, they had the feed of all of this too, and I'd be in a control room and maybe we'd fly with a force ship and each aircraft would have its own control room with like 40 people. And you have, maybe exaggerating a little bit, but it was around, some of these missions would require that really intricate team sport. Like it felt like you're a professional athlete. And
Wow.
I would put it probably on that same scale on doing some of the tests where you have this entire team and it is a team. Like just a piece of it. Now I'm in the cockpit, but everyone else is just as necessary to make that successful. And the communication is going like this, and you just kind of get into a flow as you're having to hit crazy test points at crazy G forces and airspeed, and angle of attack has to be just right. And you're talking, communicating with a tanker aircraft and target aircraft and boats at the same time. And right, like it was just really cool, exciting, collaborative experience that is just amazing.
That is cool, man. Thinking a lot about what you said in terms of like the movie version of a test pilot and then the actual real work of being a test pilot. But I feel like sometimes life is like that, you entrepreneurship or starting something. It's always that hero story, which makes for a great movie and great story, right? Like people like to watch that. But reality is there's probably a lot of people along the way that helped. There's a team of people that make that happen. And so I think kind of dispelling that, it's not that you don't want to, go see that movie, but your real life is not like that, right? There's moments where, you maybe you have that light bulb moment, that inspiration, but to get anything done meaningful, it takes a team. So, and for you working in those teams, what made a good team? Like were there teams that you were part of and said, I've been a part of better teams, or you could identify like this is not working the way that it should. And it seems like in those moments, I mean, especially for a test pilot, it could be life or death if you don't have the right team. So what makes a good team?
I mean, there's a number of things that I think about that represent, good team members, and I always strive to be a good team member. I think trust is so important. You need trust. But to have trust, you need team members that have integrity. So for me to trust someone that they're at least trying their hardest. They may be failing to some regard. I may be failing to some regard. But if I'm doing it with integrity, that's, I think, the most important thing. I'm doing it for the right reasons,
Yeah.
right? And now, if I know, Gary, that we're on a team and you're doing it for the right reasons and we fail, like we can go beyond and figure out, okay, how do we not fail in the future? But if
Mm.
I don't trust you because you lack integrity, right, I think is a recipe for a team that will never really succeed. They may succeed in the near term. And heck, they may succeed in the long term to a degree, but I don't think those people that are part of that experience will be really that fulfilled or will find it as an enjoyable experience. And I
Yeah.
think there's examples of that. And I say it because I've managed teams and I've managed people that are managing teams at large teams. And sometimes leaders can be really bad, but the team still delivers. But that doesn't mean
Mm.
that the leader of that organization is any good. It just means they may have a really great team behind them.
Yeah.
So I do think integrity is probably the most, for me, the most important piece of it. And
Interesting.
I can train someone to do certain tasks, but I think with that integrity also comes things like being humble and knowing like you can make mistakes, because when I approach you with an error, I don't need you getting defensive, right?
Mm,
Like I need you wanting to learn from that experience. And in the fighter pilot community, we are very brutal with one another in our feedback in a debrief,
mm,
but we do it in a way that it's kind of expected, and you need to learn to develop thick skin, which means accepting feedback and be like, yeah, that was my bad, sorry, won't happen again, right? Taking notes and actually striving to have that error not occur again, even though we all know that it may happen again, right? Like it
yeah.
just,
Yeah. Yeah.
so I think there's a mix of the integrity. I think there's the humility. I think you bring in like excellence, the pursuit of excellence. And by the way, I'm almost describing the core values: integrity, servants, excellence for the Air Force. I actually think of, and with my nonprofit, we have core values, but it's integrity, excellence, and respect, right? Service is fantastic as you're serving your nation in the military. But regardless, I do think I want people striving for
Mm,
excellence. I want
mm,
them striving with a passion, a zeal to deliver something because like they're passionate about it. And at times I think we are looking for immediate gratification, which
mm,
is not a passion for something. So I don't want people that are just looking for immediate gratification, because passion is really important, and it takes work to deliver something of value. And then I think the respect part is really important, that we just respect one another. I'm going to listen to this person. They may be wrong. That doesn't
mm.
mean you have to disrespect them, and you may be wrong. That's where the humility comes in. So I think it's a convergence of kind of some of these soft skills that I think make an effective team. And then there's other things like organizational skills and time management and
Yeah.
technical acumen and things like that. But I think
Yeah.
it's that's other stuff.
So interesting. Have you seen the Sinek video? And he talks about Navy SEAL teams and as a kind of a example of high performing teams. And there's the trust and skills kind of matrix. They would rather have, according to Simon Sinek in his interview, they would rather have a kind of medium skilled person, but high integrity, high trust, than a high skilled, low trust person, because that's like a cancer to a team. And he defined trust like leave your wife with them kind of trust. And it's interesting how that kind of keeps coming up in, you know,
Yeah.
these high performing teams and military situations and in others. But we don't really teach that in school. We don't talk about, you say the soft skills, but those are the things that make great organizations work. So yeah, and I guess you develop trust, and there's ways to measure that, I guess, through the Navy SEALs. But when you're giving that feedback, and you said that brutal feedback, is it because you trust the other person that they actually know what they're doing and they can critique you? Like, what does that environment look like? Those, crucial conversations, because I would imagine, again, this is high stakes environment for pilots, right? It's like, hey, I need you to be at your top of your game. But that brutal feedback, you say, hey, that's just expected. What do those conversations look like?
Well, I won't talk the fighter pilot community. We debrief
Mm,
thoroughly. The test pilot community the same. So let me give test pilot community experience, because that's probably more approachable to people. Because in a test pilot debrief, after you've done a test mission, like I'm an air crew that's in the room, and maybe the debrief will have like maybe 20 to 50 people in a debrief. And then there's maybe two or three other air crew, but the rest are all civilian. And when I say civilian, I mean government civilians or contractor, but they're civilians. They're not military members. In a fighter pilot debrief, it's usually, maybe two of you, maybe four of you, maybe eight of you. You're all fighter pilots, and you're sitting there, and there's like an expectation of what is going to happen during that debrief. And everyone's kind of on singing from the same sheet of music. And there's an expectation there that we can also talk about. But the debrief is somewhat similar. Like it is very to the point. It is like very thorough. That radio communication was wrong. This is what it should have been. And then as an instructor in a fighter pilot debrief, you would ask, like, you're trying to get to the root cause of something. Okay, you missed targeting your target responsibility. So you had an enemy out there, you were supposed to target them, you missed them. Well, the problem isn't, hey, you missed them, don't miss them next time, you moron, like move on. That's not a fighter pilot debrief, right? It is like, okay, what was your perception leading up to that moment? What were the other aspects and factors that fed into that? Okay, you missed them because you weren't using your radar effectively. Okay, why weren't you using your radar effectively? And it's actually out of love, a lot of this. Now, they wouldn't use the word love because that's too corny or whatever, but it's out of respect. And you're trying to build someone up, is my point when I say love.
Yeah.
So, okay, you put your radar in the wrong place. Well, why'd you put your radar in the wrong place? Oh, because your flight lead, and maybe you're a fourth ship and you're number 4 and your flight lead's number 3. I'm just making all this up, but maybe your flight lead told you to turn cold and you weren't expecting to, and you were out of position and you were looking for your flight lead and you went blind. So now you kind of peel back this onion, you go and go and go, and you call out all the errors, but what led to that error may have been actually another aircraft that had a misperception on their part. Then you turn to number 3 and you say, number 3, why did you have them turn cold at that point? Oh, well, I thought this because I heard this on the radio. Okay. And you pull that back more and more, and you'll end up getting the 3 or 4 root causes of different errors that people have, of why you may have failed a mission, or what you maybe you succeeded and you got the objective, but you had errors along the way. And so you'll talk through it. Now, a test pilot debrief is very similar in the sense you have civilians know. So sometimes you have to be a little gentler, but it is still very much like trying to build people up. Like, why did you make that radio call? Like, oh, I was thinking this. Okay, well, for what it's worth, that radio call you said it in the wrong way, because radio calls, actually, the way that we say something is really important, and there's like a method behind it. So the way you said that was really ineffective. It distracted me from being able to press this button when I needed to, or you told me to press the wrong button, or right, like, and you just kind of dive into, without like hammering one person, being like, what were you thinking? Why? It's not like that. It is more direct. Hey, we're learning as a team. And then you kind of move on from all the big points. And as a test pilot, you have to go a little bit faster. You have to talk about what people saw too, with the technology, like how did it perform, type of thing.
Yeah, amazing. I
Yeah.
think there's so many, as a leader, I think that's one of the hardest things you have to do is when you're working in a team and, you need to give guidance and feedback in a way that's instructive, right? And it's not about, tearing that person down. Really, at the end of the day, you want to build them. But sometimes there's this, culture of just like push, 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 and be a jerk, and you be rude, be rude, and just kind of say whatever's on your mind, and it sounds like that is not what goes on in a pilot community, and it is out of love that you're building them up, because this is a team. You guys depend on each other. So lots of lessons. I mean, as I'm listening, I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I could use that in my next meeting. Now, is that coached? Is that coached through? Is that a
Yeah.
methodology?
I think some people are better at it than others. It is ingrained in us in the fighter pilot community, because you're a young fighter pilot and you see it emulated in front of you.
Mm,
And I do think, though, that people don't take seriously enough their responsibility to be a leader in that situation. You should be practicing leadership. You should be striving to build someone up, which means you need to understand the person, which means you need to kind of meet them where they're at, appreciate like who that individual is and how they are motivated, incentivized. You need to know how that person is going to take certain feedback, and maybe try to figure out a way to reach them effectively. Now, the difficulty can become when you have a large team, you may not have the time to focus in on. That's why you need to build supervisors that can then manage their people effectively. So it is ingrained in us, but I don't think we always take it as seriously as we should with regard to our responsibility to develop and to emulate leadership skills, to role model the right type of behavior.
mm. Yeah,
And I'm always
interesting.
trying to, right? Like, I fail all the time. That's kind of the story of like our lives, right? We fail, we get back up, we try
That's it.
again, next time. But, that is the intent.
Yeah. Scariest moment as a pilot or test pilot?
Oh, well, yeah, that's fairly easy to answer. And I've had some pretty crazy moments, but it was a midair collision that I was in when I was a fighter pilot. So back in 2008, it was dogfighting my wingman in a training scenario. And we we started off and you pass each other, 1,000 feet away from each other, 1,000 miles an hour at closure. And then you start turning towards each other. And we turn towards each other and I end up trying to get my hands on the screen here and I end up, high, and I'm coming downhill, and we're about 5,300 feet from each other at this point. If you can kind of see, like it's
Mm,
just three dimensions, right? But it's a kind of a circle that we're making here.
mm,
We're 5,300 feet from each other, and we're 7 seconds from an impact. And so I knew from this point right here, I'm like, this looks weird. It felt like we were on a collision course, and that you can think of it like if you're looking outside your windscreen
mm,
and something's not moving and it's just getting bigger, you're on a collision course with that thing. Now, if there's
mm.
a little bit of movement, right, and it's getting bigger, you're going to pass it. Does that make sense? Right? Like
Yeah.
a little,
Yep.
but there's no movement. And you're in this position all the time where you're like momentarily on a collision course with aircraft all the time. And you're like, okay. And then you adjust to, in this situation, it was not changing with any adjustments that were being made and it happens so fast. So we're 7 seconds from impact at 5,300 feet, and then at 3,000 feet, there was nothing either of us could have done to avoid the collision. So you're talking just like 2 seconds go by. You're like, that looks weird. This is uncomfortable. Too late. It's over because you're just moving so fast, and we collide. So he actually impacts about 20 feet behind my cockpit, and we have a combined closure around 500 miles an hour.
Mm,
And dude, it was crazy chaos. Like I see it unfolding in front of me, brace for impact. The impact happens. It's like not a fluid memory at all. I remember losing my vision, but not losing my consciousness. We call it graying out. That can happen from stress or some other things. And so like I can't see anything initially. I just hear the voices and my body's getting kind of thrown around. And then I get my vision back and like it's just chaos, right? Like I don't know what's going on. Your mind is like not with it. And I do remember like trying to get control of the aircraft again, but I don't have any feel with the stick. And I'm trying to reach for the throttles because I hear the audio that the engines are on fire. And then I look, we have three rear view mirrors right here and here that show, behind you so you can use them to help. But in this case, I looked at those and they're completely engulfed in flames. So I reach down and I pull the ejection handles and I'm out 20 G forces straight up, lose my, I think I lose consciousness, definitely lose my vision, and go from that crazy chaos to eerie silence as I'm under parachute. And I remember like thinking it was a dream. Like, what is this real? What's going on? And then I go through the post ejection checklist: canopy, visor, mask, seat kit, LPU, four line steer. And I start saying it like that out loud, but don't do anything. Like my mind is just not with it. And then I finally, after 30 seconds, start doing things, but I have to like restart doing them all. And like canopy is just checking that you have a parachute. Either way, I get to seat kit in that when I finally get to seat kit. And I think, oh, I know what to do on this one. And I detach my seat kit, which when you get to CKIT in the emergency ground egress checklist, you detach your CKIT. But I wasn't doing my emergency ground eject checklist. I was doing my post ejection checklist.
mm,
So seat kit, same phrase, different action. When you're under parachute is just making sure that you have your seat kit with you. But what I did was drop my seat kit. So I detached it and I lost all my survival equipment. So I hit the waters. It was in February. 60-degree waters, 6-foot waves, 70 miles south of Panama City, Destin, the panhandle there of Florida,
yeah.
with nothing but a life preserver unit around my neck because I dropped all my radio, my life raft, my water, my food, everything that was in my seat kit. That we sit on a kit. It's called the seat kit that has all of our survival equipment. Dude, I'm in the water for hours. No one can find me because I have no signaling device. I'm freezing right away. Within 2 minutes, I'm like shivering. You lose your body heat 25 times faster in water than you do in air. And so I'm there thinking I'm going to die. The sun is getting lower. Once again, it's February and it's in the afternoon. Clouds are coming in. The planes, I see them flying, but far away from me. They never see me. And I remember like up and down on these 6-foot waves. I see a fishing boat coming towards me. And then, 5 minutes later, I see it turned away and going away from me. And I'm like, goodness. And then a few minutes later, they're turned back towards me and they see me They roll up alongside me and they're like, "Hey man, you want to ride?" And I'm just like really, really cold and was like, "Yes, please." And they pull me up into their boat. And dude, it was a 25-foot fishing boat that was out for the day in 6-foot waves, 70 miles south of Panama City, that happened upon me in the middle of the Gulf of Mexico.
Wow, that's a miracle, man.
And I survived. And
Yeah.
my wingman died. It's so tragic. It is hard for me to talk about still, to a degree, because um, it's a failure. It was a failure on both of our parts, with regard to flying. But I mean, I feel like I failed my profession. I feel like I failed his family. I feel like I failed him. Right? Like, it was this moment of deep sadness because of the tragedy that was losing this remarkable person. And so, what do you do with that failure? And I think that that's a very important conversation to have, because we all experience failure. But what do we do with that failure? How do we pick ourselves back up? And I will tell you, I think it's a lie when someone's like, you got to pick yourself back up and move on, because resiliency is not a solo sport, right? Like, it is a team sport. We don't pick ourselves back up. We surround ourselves with people that are there to help us get back up, to give us perspective. And then at times we turn around and we help those other people around us in those moments back up, because we need to be there for each other, right? Like, it is a team effort, resiliency. And so this failure has stuck with me, of course, through my career. And I try to honor my wingmen through the technology I'm developing, through my efforts. And I will say it was very serendipitous. A couple years later, I found myself a part of a team developing the first ever autonomous life-saving capability for aircraft to avoid collisions. So the aircraft know they're going to hit each other. They take control away from the pilot to avoid the collision, and they give control back to the pilot. So it's
Wow.
autonomous life-saving technology that I was like the first person to fly and develop.
Mm.
And then I was a part of teams that were developing automatic ground collision avoidance that have saved many lives. And I've just kind of been a part of this world of how do we adopt autonomy to save people's lives that would have saved my wingman's life. And that has been something that I've been very passionate about as I develop, capability for the military.
Yeah. And I'm sorry for your loss, Tucker. That's tough. So from I can imagine just a very difficult time on all fronts to what are some of the, and what a legacy to be able to develop some of those things that would have helped. I'm sure just kind of knowing firsthand what that experience was like, can help others. Sometimes tragedy builds things for you. I've definitely experienced that in my life, had my own set of tragedies happen, but won't get into that today. What were the highs? So what's the greatest experience on being a test pilot?
Well, I think that, I mean, honestly, it comes back to the automatic ground collision avoidance. The
Mm.
most amazing thing that happened in the F-35 was when I was programmatically leading that organization. I was like, hey, I think we can develop autonomous life-saving capability in F-35, auto GCAS, automatic ground collision avoidance. The plane knows it's going to hit the ground and recovers the plane, saves the pilot's life from a myriad of different challenges that the pilot may be facing, from loss of consciousness to just not being aware that they're that close to the ground, not recovering quick enough. But it was slated to go into the F-35 in 2027. And the year was like 20, I want to say 16, where I asked the question, like, can we go do this faster? And they're like, no, we can't. And I was like, okay, well, I tried. And then about 9 months later, I was like, I don't know if I tried hard enough.
Mm.
And me and a team of about 4 other people were like, we need to ask harder questions and we need to get better answers. And so we asked the engineers and we're like, why can't it go in? Like, what is stopping it from going in? And we start pulling back that onion and they're like, actually, we think that we could maybe get this in. And so then we start pulling together a bigger team and we're like, okay, how are we going to do this? And then I start working programmatically, because you need to get approval to like add in capability early. And so I started like working the phones and talking to the different, because it's international program. So I had to convince the Navy, the Marine Corps, the Air Force, international partners. And so we went on this huge effort to basically accelerate the adoption of auto GCAS in the F-35. And you'd think like people would be like, oh no, this is great. We definitely should do it. No, like there was a lot of headwind. There were a lot of people against what we were trying to do, sadly. And they weren't bad Americans or
Yeah.
people. They just thought, oh no, we don't need that. We need these other things. And they were wrong, right? Because auto GCAS saves like at least an aircraft, if not two, and lives each year. So you're like,
Yeah.
you're losing a lot of aircraft if you don't adopt this technology. So we fought for it tooth and nail. We got it into the program. Is a crazy story that we don't have the time to get into all right here, but we got it approved. We got it tested within 1 year. We got it fielded out to the different platforms a little bit after that. And we actually won the Collier Trophy, which is kind of the biggest trophy in aerospace in America from the National Aeronautics Association for the greatest accomplishment in aviation or aerospace for a given year. They actually gave us that award for the implementation of auto GCAS in fighter aircraft and the acceleration of getting it into the F-35, which was awesome to be a part of. But the real reward came like 6 months later when we think we saved sometimes you're not 100% certain you saved a pilot's life, but we saved the first pilot's life basically with 35 auto GCAS. So that was like the most amazing experience in ARC, especially coming from, me sitting in that Gulf waters, a decade earlier,
Wow.
thinking I'm going to die, not knowing how this is going to unfold, all the way to like being a part of this story that was really just an amazing team to be a part of.
Yo, that's very, very cool. Um, you can only see the dots looking backwards, as the quote from Steve Jobs says, right? You never know how life's going to turn out. So you said when you got to MIT, you saw some scary things, and there's a lot of talk about AI agents, and kind of the world that we live in is changing dramatically fast. I'd say probably the biggest change we've ever seen. And I don't think we've even started to feel the full impact of this
Not
quite
even
yet.
close.
What did you see that said, I gotta stay in the seat a little longer for our nation and for just what the Air Force needs? What was it that kind of rang that alarm bell for you?
Yeah, it was really the technology was more advanced than people realized.
Mm,
And I don't think you can appreciate it unless you're in it. For instance, we knew large language models were going to be a big deal before ChatGPT ever came out.
mm,
Like we were sitting there at the Accelerator being like, large language models are going to be a huge issue and opportunity. So we need to look to like try to adopt that, but nearly impossible to get anyone to do anything about it in the military.
mm,
And then ChatGPT happens and you're like, blows everyone's mind. You're like, yeah, we saw this coming. Why didn't we prepare for this?
mm,
And then you see these other things that are coming and you're like, man, large language models are cute in my view compared to what's coming, which is like matched with physical autonomous systems, robots, is going to transform even more of our world than we can appreciate and understand.
mm.
Right. And so I think it was just a convergence of like this technology is here. It is here to stay. It is forever changing the landscape, and we are not doing anything about it.
Yeah.
And we still, like, I look at the Air Force, I'm like, what are you guys doing? Right. Like, we are going too slow in order to adopt this because people are risk averse. They don't understand the capability. They're stuck in the old way of like thinking about acquisition, the old way of thinking about technology. And I think it's a huge detriment to our national security. I saw that kind of back while I was active duty at MIT, being like, what is going on? We are not doing this correctly. And I felt like I owed it to America to serve at least one more time, and now to get out and focus on that from the
Mm.
outside, because it's going to get very disruptive. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, yeah. I've worked in schools for pretty much my entire career. And I was at a conference probably 3 or 4 months ago, and I heard a superintendent, which I had superintendent of a school district in California, get up on stage and essentially say that if we don't, if school districts, which are kind of like government agencies, right? They're slow to adopt, slow to change. In fact, I wrote an article about this. But if they don't start to adopt AI in a radically new way, and we're not talking about like incremental change here, like a complete paradigm shift, that he feels that they risk being irrelevant. And it was the first time I've ever heard someone say that out loud, that is running a school district. And I was like, I think this guy is absolutely right. There is this moment that's happening, and unless you're in it, like you said, you were seeing these things and you're like, the future is like these things are here, they're happening. And this convergence of AI and robotics, where it's like the system now has a vehicle to move around in, to see the world, to operate. That's a whole new,
Yeah.
that's a whole new world. Um, so so what do you do in those systems? Like what is the end state of that? Where do you see this going ultimately?
Yeah, well, I think our society needs to figure out how we're going to basically adopt some of this capability, understanding that it can be really disruptive if you replace everyone's job with robots, because the the technical capability is there to drive autonomous vehicles, right? What does that look like for automakers? What does that look like if autonomous vehicles are everywhere driving people around? What does it look like for Uber drivers or taxi drivers or bus drivers or truck drivers, right? So you could just take one part of like where this capability is progressing and say, okay, how is that going to change society? But it's not just, say, driving. It's also, well, factory workers and manufacturing and fast food workers, and right, like the list goes on
Yeah.
about all these different things. And that's when you do robots. We as a society are still having to deal with like, okay, right now, how is this disrupting the book industry or marketing or any type of job that sits in front of a computer is being influenced by large language models and generative AI,
Yeah.
right? So it's all of them also dealing with that. And so what we can't afford as a society in the next like 3 years, if it all happens at once, then I don't like what happens to us as a social fabric, I think will
Mm.
get torn apart. And so I think we need to be very mindful of how we adopt and think through like how we bring about some of the technology and how do we protect some of the careers that are out there. I like creative destruction. So I'm not one to say, no, we'll never adopt it in this way because we want to protect these workers, right? Like it'd be like back in the early 1900s saying, we don't want cars because we need all these people that deal with horses to be effective, right? So I think it's
Yeah.
incumbent upon the government and industry to start thinking through like, well, what jobs then are humans going to be responsible for? And how do we make sure that we transition in a very, very much accelerated, ecosystem?
So now that you've done all of this great work, you're working with defense companies. What's the next test pilot phase for Tucker Hamilton? Is there
I
what's
don't
the
know.
next
So
site?
I have a book coming out, right?
Okay.
It's called Unlocking the Last 20%, Rising to Greatness Through Discipline, Balance, and Resiliency. And it's taking some of my stories and trying to give some thoughtful ways of approaching certain aspects of our journey, right? Like trying to pursue more, push ourselves more, untap more of our latent potential. And that comes from like visualization to how we prepare, to how we are disciplined, to how we lean on our community, to how we use resiliency and grow through failures. And then it also talks about like generational resiliency, which is super important. And there's some cool stories in there. So you can actually look for it, and it's on pre-sale right now. It's called Unlocking the Last 20%. It comes out in March 2026, but it's available, like I said, right now for pre-sale. So I'll see, like sharing my story, I think is great. So there's that aspect of it, but I don't want to be like a speaker on a speaker series, which I greatly respect those people. But I feel like I want to stay involved with technology development and helping companies do something. So I'm looking about maybe, helping some investment folks, friends of mine, and driving change with the right conversations. I think with the right mindset, with the right empathy, with the right leadership, right? Trying to help as we go through this transition as a society. So I think I just want to stay involved with that and be a part of amazing teams that are doing cool things.
Love that, man. Love that. So where can we find this?
Basically anywhere where books are sold. So from
Anywhere
Barnes and
books.
Noble to Books a Million to Amazon, and the list goes on. It's a Simon and Schuster book. It's called Unlocking the Last 20%.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely go check it out myself. And Tucker, I wanted to say thank you, man, for giving me the time, sharing your stories, lots of lessons learned. So we'll publish this entire transcript and some of the key points. One of the things we want to do is make sure there's a playlist for people so that they can go out there and take some of these lessons learned in leadership and team building, from people who have been there, done it, been in the high stakes environments, talked to Jerry Bruckheimer along the way, just as a side, and now are helping steward the future of AI in our country. And thank you again for just your service and for your passion for this industry. And we kind of got to know each other through the podcast, as I didn't know all of your story, but I feel like I've got a friend, so a kindred spirit. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It was great joining with you on 50 Chairs. I will say, I love what you're doing. I love the idea, the concept behind this. I think it is so exciting to hear people's stories about, how they persevered, how they demonstrated grit, how they demonstrated belief in themselves and belief in the people around them to deliver something like filling 50 chairs, right? Just this idea is really thoughtful. And thank you for the platform that you're going to give so many voices and reach so many people through this amazing podcast that you're kicking off. So I'm just honored to be a small part of the beginning of this journey. And I look forward to seeing your success as you move 50 chairs out into the.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Appreciate it. Talk to you later.
Gary.